Amazon just showed you Sauron forging the One Ring, and they are selling it as the moment he wins. Molten gold pours into the mold in the fires of Mount Doom. The Dark Lord slides the ring onto his finger, and the trailer promises this is the edge he needs to rule Middle-earth. Here is what the trailer will not tell you. That is the exact moment Sauron becomes killable for the first time in his existence. Before the forge fires cooled, the most dangerous being in the world had built the only weapon that could ever destroy him. And then he wore it in public, because before the ring, Sauron was the villain who could not lose. In the First Age, a giant wolfhound named Huar pinned him to the ground in single combat, and Sauron simply abandoned his broken body and drifted away as a shadow, to rebuild somewhere safer. Ages later, when the island kingdom of Numenor was dragged under the ocean, with Sauron standing in the middle of it, the drowning destroyed his physical form, and his spirit walked out of the wreckage and built itself a new one. Armies could beat him, heroes could humiliate him, and the sea itself could swallow him whole. But nothing could end him, because his power lived inside his own spirit, and a spirit does not burn and does not drown. Every defeat he ever suffered was a setback, never a death. But Sauron never wanted mere survival. He wanted to rule everything, and the elves held power he could not take from them by force. So he decided to steal it from the inside. He put on a fair form, named himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and spent long years teaching the elven smiths of Eregion to forge rings of power. The Silmarillion tells us what came next. Secretly, in the fire of Mount Doom, Sauron forged one ring to rule them all, a master ring that contained the powers of the others, so that whoever wore it could see the thoughts of anyone using a lesser ring, govern everything they did, and in the end enslave them completely. On paper, it is the perfect weapon. One band of gold, and every rival power in Middle-earth answers to him. Then he put it on, and the plan detonated in his hand. The Silmarillion is blunt about it. The instant Sauron set the One Ring on his finger, the elves were aware of him. They knew him, they understood exactly what he intended for them, and in anger and fear, they took their rings off. Years of patient deception, the fair face, the friendly lessons in the forge, all of it burned away in a single moment, because the act of wearing his masterpiece announced him to the very people it was built to enslave. The weapon designed for secret control worked like a signal flare, and with the deception dead, the elves went to war, and Sauron spent the rest of the age fighting openly for what he had planned to take quietly. To be fair to the plan, the ring still paid him back in terrible ways. When his armies broke Eregion, Sauron tortured its greatest smith, Celebrimbor, and seized every lesser ring he could find. 9 of them went out as gifts to kings and sorcerers of men, and one by one those men faded into the Nazgul, wraiths with no will left except his. The ring really could enslave exactly as designed. But look at what the design was for and what it actually bought. The weapon meant to quietly capture the deathless elves delivered him 9 dead men, an open war, and enemies who now understood precisely what he was. That was the first cost of the ring, and it was the cheap one. The expensive cost was sitting inside the gold itself. Tolkien spelled that cost out himself in a long letter to his publisher, Milton Waldman, in 1950. To make the ring powerful enough to rule the others, Sauron had been obliged to let a great part of his own native power pass out of his spirit and into the gold. While he wore it, his strength on earth was greater than ever. Even when he did not wear it, the power stayed connected to him, so he lost nothing day to day. It sounds like a trade with no downside, but Tolkien then lays out the 2 clauses in the fine print, and they are the whole story. First, the ring could be taken. If an enemy strong enough claimed it and mastered it, that enemy could turn everything Sauron had ever built against him, overthrow him, and take his place. His own weapon was now the sharpest sword, pointed at his throat, which is exactly why the thought of someone like Aragorn wielding it kept him in genuine fear. And second, the ring could be destroyed. If it ever went into fire hot enough to unmake it, the power inside would dissolve, and Sauron himself would be diminished to vanishing point, reduced to a shadow, a mere memory of malice with no way back. Hold that next to everything you heard a minute ago. This is the being who shrugged off a drowning continent. Now a single object in a single fire could erase him permanently. The unkillable villain had moved his own life out of his body and into an object, and an object can be carried, stolen, dropped, or melted. For the first time since the world was made, a path existed that ended in Sauron being gone forever, and Sauron is the one who paved it. The power he poured into the ring did not flow back when the plan went wrong. It sat in the gold, whether the gold sat on his finger or at the bottom of a river. So why did he do it anyway? And why was he not terrified every day afterward? Tolkien gives the answer in the same letter, and it might be the most revealing sentence he ever wrote about Sauron. The destruction of the ring was a possibility Sauron never contemplated and never feared. In his mind, the scenario was physically impossible. No smith work weaker than his own could break the ring, and no ordinary fire could melt it. The only flame in the world that could unmake it burned inside Mount Doom, in the heart of Mordor, inside his own borders under his own watch. To reach it, an enemy would have to carry the ring past every army he had, into the one place on the map he controlled most completely. As far as Sauron was concerned, no enemy would ever get that far, so the danger was not worth a single night of worry. But that lock had a second half, and it lived inside his own head. Gandalf saw it clearly. At the council in Rivendell, Gandalf tells the assembled leaders that the only measure Sauron knows is desire for power, and that he judges every heart by it. Into his heart, the thought will not enter, that anyone would refuse the ring. Later, in the Two Towers, Gandalf sharpens the point even further. Sauron lives in great fear that some mighty enemy will appear wielding the ring and come to cast him down and take his place. That his enemies might want to cast him down and put no one in his place has never occurred to him. That they would try to destroy the ring itself has not yet entered his darkest dream. And that blindness is not just Gandalf guessing. Tolkien confirms it in his own commentary. Sauron could imagine betrayal, ambition, conquest, and usurpation, because those are the things he would do. He could not imagine someone holding ultimate power and choosing to burn it. Therefore, the entire war plan of the Free Peoples fit inside a gap in Sauron's mind. The council at Rivendell looked at the mightiest weapon in existence and chose the one strategy its maker was incapable of predicting. Every scout Sauron sent to find the ring assumed it was being kept, hidden, and prepared for use against him. Every fear he had about Aragorn, the heir of the men who cut him down before, pulled his gaze toward thrones and armies. When Aragorn marched an army to the Black Gate, Sauron read it as the challenge he had always expected, the new power coming to take his place. And every eye he turned toward that army was an eye turned away from two exhausted hobbits, crawling up the side of his mountain, carrying his own power toward the one fire that could end him. The trap he forged closed on him twice. The first time, at the end of the Second Age, the last alliance of elves and men brought him to battle, and Gil-galad and Elendil died, bringing him down. Isildur took up the hilt of his father's broken sword and cut the ring from Sauron's hand, and Tolkien describes what happened in that instant. His power departed, and his spirit fled into the shadows. The greatest tyrant of the age was beaten, not by destroying him, which no army could do, but by taking the object he had chained himself to. And yet the ring itself survived, which meant Sauron survived, diminished and formless, but still tethered to his power and still able to crawl back. So he spent the next age as a searching eye, hunting the severed piece himself across Middle-earth. He needed the ring back to be whole again, and he had no way to cut himself free of it, so the same object that once served him now dictated the terms of his entire existence. The second closing came at Mount Doom, and it was the ending Tolkien had built into the gold from the start. The fire Sauron believed no enemy could ever reach was reached, and even the final step was taken by something he could never have predicted. At the edge of the flame, the creature the ring had enslaved longest bit it from the bearer's hand and fell into the fire, still clutching it. The ring went into the flame it came from. With the help of its own oldest victim, the power inside it dissolved, and everything Sauron had ever been collapsed to vanishing point, a shadow of malice with no strength to ever take shape again. The defeat that was impossible for an entire mythology became inevitable the moment one object melted, because Sauron had personally gathered his own immortality into a single point of failure and then convinced himself the failure could never happen. So when the new season arrives in November and you watch the molten gold pour, the hammer fall, and the Dark Lord promised that this is how he rises, remember what is actually on the anvil. Every empire he builds afterward, the elves he hunts, the kings he corrupts, the age of fear he unleashes, All of it flows from this one act, and so does his ending. He is not forging his victory. He is forging the only door his enemies will ever need, and the strangest part is who proved able to walk past it untouched. Because the ring that terrified Gandalf and haunted kings had no grip at all on one quiet wood elf who walked beside it for months. And why that happened tells you more about how the ring actually works than any battle ever could. That is where we are going next.